drove a 36-foot boat down to the Keys. Josh and Jake, I haven't talked to.
Okay, I think we're ready. So I'm going to go ahead and call to order the March 13th school board meeting of the Seminole County School Board. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Calderon for her to introduce our student invoker this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Every single day we are blessed with seeing talented students in our schools, and I had the honor to judge the Miss Seminole High School scholarship pageant recently. And this young woman shared her thoughts with the entire audience that night that really took control of all of us. And so this evening I've asked Dr. Collins, her principal, to introduce her to you so she could also share her thoughts with those of you in our chambers this evening.
Good evening, Board, Superintendent. It is my pleasure to introduce Malavika Kanan. Malavika is a junior in the International Baccalaureate program. She currently holds a 4.7 weighted grade point average. She is editor-in-chief of our school's newspaper, the Seminole. Was just named Miss SHS for the 2018-2019 school year, and more recently has been nominated as Seminole High School's Dreamer and Doer. And so we just love all that she does. She's an outstanding young lady in every regard. Malavika.
So my name is Malavika, and recently I had the honor of performing my spoken word poem, 2 Weeks to June, at the Miss SHS talent portion. So I'm going to go ahead and share that poem with you today, so thank you so much. Sometimes I still think it's too soon. When I look back 2 weeks to June, to when I sat with my chair tipped back, looking at the sky, too old to grow up, too young to die, friends laughing, heart beating, life moving, our choosing. But when I looked down at my phone, in my head, I heard it, like a summer's twisted melody, like shouts down a tunnel endlessly, like heat decay, like entropy. I saw the headlines. There were lists of names of 49 people who smiled and cried and laughed like me, except that they had died. My city's name on every TV screen. I could hear my hometown scream and hear my leaders act distraught, but I didn't hear them make it stop. And what I felt inside my heart was not political robots, but thoughts, gunshots, because this was my home. Orlando, we were the deadliest mass shooting in history until we were just that. We were history because we'd all moved on to the next tragedy, but only for a week. A week. The news vans are gone, the cameras packed, the gun debate over, the cards are still stacked, and here's the thing. I grew up believing that I lived in the best country in the world because my parents schemed and climbed and dreamed and strived all to come to America, where it's for the people, by the people, not where we're always losing people, where empathy trumps apathy, where we stand for our humanity, where we recognize the gravity that something needs to change. And I'll admit that at first, I didn't change. I closed my eyes and plugged my ears until I couldn't help the fear, until the bullets rained down near, until I couldn't help but hear a month ago of the latest slaughter of kids just like us, your sons and daughters. Children on the brink of life, gunned down in spite of partisan strife. And that is when I thought, at what point was it decided? Somewhere, somehow, somebody said that my life wasn't worth a gun, that we'd rather let the bullets rain than end the rain of hashtag prayers, that we'd steel our nerves with actual steel, wait 48 hours for the public to heal. At what point was it decided that we'd rather lay our kids to rest than take a stand to face the unrest? To the NRA, they never said, at what point are enough kids dead, enough blood to turn the red states red? At what point are we back to a wall? Hands up, don't shoot, please hear our call. And still, when all this is over, when all this is history, I hope my children will think it's a mystery that we ever lived in a place where guns took our lives. I want them to know that I fought, that I strived, that my generation was the change, the salvation, that we ended gun violence across our own nation. I hope that I can tell my child that when the bullets rang, I didn't hide, that I did my part, I opened my heart, that I channeled my rage on my high school stage. And at this point, right here, right now with all of us is when we finally choose to make a change. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for your talents and for sharing that. And I'd just like to add a few words to our phenomenal team of Seminole County Public Schools. We know how hard you work, and our spring break is coming up, and I just wanted to share a few thoughts to convince you again to unplug. Take time for you, take time for your family. We need to take time of ourselves so we can take care of these beautiful children. Self-care is so important. When you take time to replenish your spirit, it allows you to serve others from the overflow. You cannot serve from an empty vessel. So take the time to refill your vessel during spring break. We appreciate all you do for our children each and every day of the school year. And at this point in time, I'd like to ask you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we recognize the representatives that are here joining us today from different organizations, I'd like the record to reflect that all school board members are in attendance, in addition to Mrs. Beeman and Dr. Griffin and our school board clerk, Ms. Moramus. And with that, gosh, we've got a lot of people joining us, don't we? Okay. Bobby Aganina, representing Seminole Education Association from Lake Howell High School, is here with us tonight. Polly DeLucia from the Seminole County Council PTA. Thank you, Polly. Bill Collister is here as a candidate for Seminole County School Board. Alan Youngblood is here as a candidate for Seminole County School Board. Christine Kraus, candidate for Seminole County School Board. And Takesha Velazquez, from Lake Mary High School, an 11th grader. Young Women of Excellence. Where are you, Takesha? Great. Thank you so much for being here. We love it when our students take time out and come to these meetings. They're just so much fun. You're going to love it.
That's our story, and we're sticking to it.
Superintendent, do you have any modifications for the agenda?
Just one, Madam Chair. The addendum for good cause is marked on our electronic agenda by a green flag named addendum item.
And any modifications, school board members? Mrs. Almond?
No modifications, thank you.
Mrs. Sanchez?
No modifications, thank you.
Dr. Calderon?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
I have a motion to approve the agenda
So
outline.
moved.
Second.
One of these days, you're going to beat them to the punch. I don't know when it's going to be. You're going to do it.
What if I can move first? So I can say, can I say it now?
All right. Motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'm still trying to pull my act.
No discussion. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, Dr. Griffin, you have an administrator we want to recognize.
Yes, we
tonight.
do. Let's go down and meet our new administrator.
My nose is.
Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Griffin, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our newest administrator in the ESSS department, our coordinator of medical health services, Stephanie Jackson. Stephanie is a 1997 Seminole High School graduate from the Health Academy. After leaving high school, Stephanie graduated with honors from the College of Nursing at the University of Florida. She started her nursing career at Florida Hospital as a primary RN for renal transplants and vascular surgical patients, then gained experience in newborn nursery, labor and delivery, and volunteered as an RN in Peru. In May of 2010, Stephanie was named the RN coordinator for the Baby Place in Altamont, Florida, and most recently was an assistant manager of nurses at Florida Hospital for pediatric and vascular surgery specialists. Over the course of the last few years, Stephanie supervised 20 nurses and coordinated surgery schedules for 7 surgeons. With her this evening is her son, 8-year-old Robert, and daughter, 4-year-old Willow, both students at Forest City Elementary School.
For school district highlights on our agenda this evening, we have a new highlight that we didn't know we would have until this morning's Board of County Commissioners meeting. So thankfully, we have Cammie Corbett here with us today, who is our outside counsel from Foley and Lardner. You all may remember we've spent a lot of time with Ms. Corbett over the course of the last couple of years dealing with impact fees. And I told her today, I said, don't take this the wrong way, but I thought we weren't going to see each other again, at least for not a long time. But there have been some interesting occurrences. So I don't know, Ms. Beeman, if you want to talk about those, just kick it off, or if we should have Cammie start. But I just want all of the board members to know everything that was downloaded to me earlier this morning.
I'd like Ms. Corbett to brief the board on the events of today.
First, is this on? Yep. First, I want to say that student's speech was amazing and inspiring. That was incredible. Just had to get that off my chest. But
We have Kleenex if you need. We pass it up and down the row.
I got a call yesterday afternoon, just before 4 p.m., from Paul Chipok, the Assistant County Attorney, letting me know that Hal Cantor from Lowndes Drosnick and Randy Morris, and an apartment trade organization that I had never heard of, AAGO. We're planning to make a presentation to the Board of County Commissioners this morning as a chairman's item that Mr. Chairman Haran allowed to be scheduled today. That gave me just enough time to get over here and attend the meeting to find out what was going on. And what was presented this morning was an argument that the apartment community, owners and developers of apartment communities were not properly engaged during the impact fee study, and that GOBA had had an opportunity to be engaged, but not the apartments. And accordingly, they were arguing that their concerns regarding vested rights were not properly considered by the board, and asking the board to reconsider both certain provisions of the administrative code that they had passed that dealt with who qualifies to have a vesting agreement in Seminole County, and then more significantly arguing that instead of being vested for 1 year, they should be vested for 2 years. And to my surprise, and I think all of our surprise, the board seemed very receptive to making both of those changes. They could not do so today because it was not properly advertised or scheduled, but they intend to take this up at future board meetings. The administrative code is to be addressed on the March 27th board agenda item, and then the change to the vesting time period is scheduled to go before the P&Z April 2nd and before the board April 10th. And so we want to make you aware of what was being said with respect to public engagement. We talked with staff, Sarita, Joe, and I kind of compared notes about what had been done and what hadn't been done. And from our notes and reflections, that there had been several members of the apartment development community, whether it be through their land use council or through their actual participation in the public meetings, that had been engaged and that we had heard their input. We also did some additional research on the association that appeared today, and they seem to be more of an apartment management association, so they're not one that we would have naturally engaged anyway in the process, but we are deeply concerned about the extension of the vested rights. The argument was advanced that, well, it takes 2 years to develop a property, and therefore we should have 2 years. And I think you recall from our prior discussions, the idea wasn't to vest people or allow people who are starting the process today to have a full 2 years to develop. The idea was if someone was far enough along in year one of a 2-year process that they could be vested, and that's what we had asked the board to consider, and now they seem to be reconsidering that.
Any questions of Ms. Corbett at all? I know it's a lot to take in.
It's a lot to absorb.
And I will say, I did have a phone call Friday afternoon from Mr. Morris explaining to me that he planned to make this presentation. So I'm not surprised that the presentation was made. What surprises me is that the Board of County Commissioners, who we worked so closely with for such a long period of time, after they already voted to adopt an ordinance, were open to having this reopened. That's the part that surprised me. So I want to clarify what I said earlier, that it wasn't a shock that it was presented to me. It surprises me that we're here actually discussing it. As far as the number of agencies that we reached out to, and Joe, I'm going to ask you to sort of chime in here if you could, because I think it's important for the benefit of the public too, to be reminded that this was a process that we first undertook almost 2 years ago.
Close to 2 years ago, we assembled the first group that looked at the alternative impact fee process, and that was a citizens advisory group, and then we rolled that same group over to take a look at the overall study. That group included representatives from the Greater Orlando Builders Association, GOBA. The realtors were represented there, and then we had our community, the PTA. We had school representatives, administrators on that group as well. In regards to the presentations, we probably had about 6 meetings with that group to get to the point of working with our consultant on the study and making sure that it was within line of what that group felt they could recommend to the school board. In addition to that, once that recommendation was made, we had multiple meetings. I met with the Greater Orlando Realtors Association. We met with GOBA and did a presentation to them. We met with PABS as well, which is the business associates. So we had multiple meetings along with the advertised meetings and advertised work sessions, which the school board had, and then those that we participated in with planning and zoning as well. So it's been a long process, and we have communicated on a regular basis, and all of the meetings that we held with the Citizens Advisory Group were also advertised and were public meetings as well.
I think it's also interesting to note that the school board's resolution that we adopted did not provide for vesting because vesting was not taken into account in the county's ordinance at the time. So the county didn't have vesting in their ordinance up until this point, so we did not take that into account in our discussion because it wasn't there. It wasn't until after we adopted our resolution, presented it to the Board of County Commissioners, that came back much later into the conversation that this idea of vesting needed to be taken up. I believe we talked about that at a work session, you may recall. It was a very lengthy work session. There was a lot going on there. But our recommendation was that instead of getting engaged in the vesting discussion, that we stick with our recommendation of phasing the implementation of those impact fees over the course of 2 years, because it would sort of provide the same relief, but without the hassle and the complication of vesting. So that was our recommendation. So the BCC took up the idea of vesting on their own. I think it was their staff's recommendation. And at that meeting, which was a very long meeting, there was an argument made by one of the commissioners that they didn't want to do the phasing because the school board needs the money for capacity now. And so we don't want to phase. We want to go to that number now. So in my mind, I'm having a hard time understanding the logic of jumping from the school board needs the money now, so we're not going to phase, to, well, now we're going to allow vesting for 2 years. I'm still struggling with that personally, and I'm sure now that you're just hearing this information, but as you process it, maybe you'll come up with a reason why that makes sense. I haven't yet. But I'm at a loss for words, and we're going to be looking to you over the course of the next short bit of time to determine how best to address this.
Sure, and just to refresh everyone's recollection, from a purely legal perspective, there isn't anyone who has a vested right to not have the impact fee increased. There are some common law arguments, one being equitable estoppel that someone could advance that as applied to them, it would not be fair based on very specific facts and circumstances. And then the other is contractual impairment, and again, based on very fact-specific inquiries regarding particular people. And that seems to be expanding rapidly. And so from our perspective, from the legal perspective, I don't think that there's any legal danger that someone's going to be able to, on a facial challenge to the whole thing, say, well, you don't have the right to increase impact fees to anybody who's, quote unquote, in the process of development. And you may also recall one of the reasons why we weren't able to really establish sort of that equity line was that all the cities and counties have different processes, so it's different. It was difficult to determine at what point was enough point to say that, yes, you should be allowed to continue under the other fees, and so that's where we left off.
And of course, you know, for the benefit of the public, impact fees are only on new construction. They're only for residential development, so this would not impact existing homeowners or property owners here or commercial property, so this would be growth, essentially paying for itself is what impact fees are. And so we have been endeavoring to try to pay for growth in this community through this means, as one of our means. And here we are. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Ms. Corbett, we all know about GOBA, the Greater Orlando Builders Association. You mentioned an apartment association. What's their name? You remember?
Apartment Association of Greater Orlando, so AAGO.
You know what role they play?
It appears from the research that I was able to do today is that they are more of an association for apartment managers, many certified apartment managers. A lot of their members are pest control, building link, online services, property management services, those types of things. They may have some, from their normal political agenda, they're usually going after maintenance fees and things like that that have to do with managing apartments, not developing apartments. So those would not be the entity, those entities would not have a direct impact by an impact fee increase. And they wouldn't be people who would be having contracts to rely on the fact that they were going to manage that apartment and somehow it's impaired by the impact fee.
So not somebody we would normally want to go to present, as we did with GOBA and everybody else that we dealt
It's
with.
not a natural partner. I did inquire of county staff as to whether or not they had ever engaged the board in any other kind of policy discussions that the board might be undertaking for land use, and at least in the last couple of years, there's been no record of them making a similar appearance on any other issue. So it was a little bit surprising, and it would not have been a natural partner. And interestingly, Randy Morris, who brought sort of the association forward and said these poor people haven't had the opportunity to participate, actually did participate in several of the meetings, and perhaps if he had informed us of their existence previously, we could have engaged them, but we weren't aware of it, and it wouldn't be a natural. They were making an analogy just because of the Greater Orlando sort of tag to it, that somehow it's the same as GOBA, which clearly has a government affairs arm that is active in all matters of land use and impact fees and things in the area. So definitely not the same.
Thank you. I think it's important. And board members, just so you know, I reached out to the county manager as soon as I heard this, asked for a copy of today's presentation, and also asked to be put on the agenda at the Board of County
Perfect.
Commission meeting March 27th.
Getting ready to ask, thank you.
Madam Chair. I think one point, Mr. Rinaldi, you didn't bring up, you talked about all the school board meetings that we had, but we've also had joint work sessions with the Board of County Commissioners. And I know when, even during the earlier meetings years ago, we were saying who should be involved in this process, and no one suggested that group to us. And from little that I know, which is just what you described today, that doesn't seem like a good fit for somebody to have a seat at the table, but anyone is allowed to speak to us during public comment. We know how to get in touch with all of us, and I think you and our teams have done a great job collaborating over the years, and to have this come up to potentially, I'd like us as a board to perhaps ask Dr. Griffin or his staff to follow up on this in any way our legal counsel sees fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, one of them, I was surprised that, you know, like the earliest that, I mean, clearly this had been planned for some period of time, and that lobbying had occurred of all the county briefings or lobbying, whatever, however you want to describe it, with this organization, and their council had taken place, and the first anyone heard of it was very, very late Friday, and then for me, from legal counsel to legal counsel, it was literally quarter to 4 yesterday. And it was on the agenda for the morning this morning, so it doesn't really sound like someone that's trying to engage in the process.
The Board of County Commissioners Administrative Code is what directs the school board to implement the impact fee process?
No, the board's administrative code that's being considered, that was adopted by the board and is being reconsidered on the March 27th agenda, is applicable only to unincorporated Seminole County. It's the process that's guiding them in their decision-making as to whether or not a project is eligible for a vesting agreement by their standards. The cities are not bound by that standard. The school board would not be bound by that standard. As you may recall, the vested rights section of the actual land development code is very vague. It just simply says any of these entities, the county, the school board, or city, can enter into an agreement with a developer to negotiate sort of at the lower rate for a period not to exceed, it used to say 1 year, they're now proposing 2 years. So the administrative code is just something that staff put together to, or that actually, I think, frankly, the county attorney's office put together to guide staff in their decision-making. And so the change that's been requested, that they requested, significantly watered down their ability to evaluate that. And then I think what the county is going to be proposing is some kind of interim to that, and we probably will have comments on that as well.
What is it that prompts the school board to start the process of looking at impact fees? There is something from the county commission that dictates to the school board that we are the ones that are to.
The impact fee ordinance itself involves the school board as the advisory board for that, for the implementation of that ordinance.
So we as a school board, in response to the county's ordinance, took up the responsibility as is laid forth in their ordinance and made a recommendation to them. But are we not guided in some fashion by what we are supposed to do in that process? The creation of the Citizens Advisory Committee, and who is supposed to be on that committee, I believe. That's all dictated by the Board of County Commissioners ordinance, correct?
It is, and certainly I would say that the topic of vesting and the vested rights occurred outside of that process. That really was not brought up at any point during the process. So it was something that came up after, as you said, after you adopted your resolution. Staff cobbled together what they thought might be fair without our input. And I'm not sure where they, how they got to 2 years, but that was what they had landed on, and they presented that to the board. But that wasn't considered by any of the committees. It wasn't considered by the Planning and Zoning Board. In fact, the Planning and Zoning Board agreed with our position that there should be no vesting. So it's just been something that the Board of County Commissioners have been toying with, playing with on their own, finding language that they're comfortable with, but outside that process.
Well, I know many of us met with the individual county commissioners, and I'm inclined to make a phone call when I leave here tonight to see what I didn't understand so clearly.
I made a similar phone call earlier this afternoon before our meeting with the Business Advisory Board to one of the board members that I had reached out to. And I'm still mulling over that conversation.
It seemed to me that they seemed to be persuaded by a very vague argument about fairness and, this is what's fair, and 1 year's just not enough, and we just need to have more fairness in all of this. And they just seemed persuaded that somehow what they had done wasn't fair. And I think if they step back and reflect on what it was we actually were proposing and what the 1 year window actually did provide, I think that what they adopted was fair. I think it would have been fair to not grandfather or vest anyone, but it was certainly a fair consideration if someone was actually in the process. The 1 year time gave adequate time. The 2 year time is just simply would allow, even on their own development timeline, they're saying it takes 18 to 24 months, would allow someone who is just starting today, not even zoned, to try to vest for that period of time.
I think that's something I would like clarification on, because I think we use the phrase "in the process," and I think everyone has a different idea of what is the trigger that creates in the process. Some people think it's actually the application. Some people think it's if you have a contract for a piece of property, regardless of whether it's zoned appropriately or not. Some people think it's if you've received your SCALD letter. I think we need to have real clarification on, so that everybody's singing from the same sheet of music. When you say "in the process," this is what it means to everyone at the table, because I think that's creating some of the confusion as well. I don't know how to get that clarification right now, but I think we need to do that.
Could be something, we could talk about it, but for me, certainly engineered site plans or construction site plans, that's a substantial undertaking. And you are usually when you do that, you are really ready to go. A zoning you might do, and you might not develop the property for 6 months. It's not that, can be detailed, cannot be detailed. You could sit and wait I personally wouldn't consider that to be the threshold. It would be something along the lines of site development. But that's, again, why we sort of said it's too difficult to try to figure out how much is too much. And, if somebody did a rezoning that cost them $100,000 because they had significant opposition, and someone did a site development plan that cost $40,000, it just gets too complicated.
I think the one thing that I have stressed when I have talked with members of the development community is how much this board took into consideration every time we met in a work session, the fact that we did want to be fair to the development community. We didn't want there to be any sort of undue burden on a developer who was already down this process to whatever that degree may be. And so that's why we implemented the phasing. So that we were sensitive to that, and that was what we thought was the best thing to do to be fair. And until we can come to an agreement on what's considered significantly in the process, I don't know.
Well, and I think that's one of the challenging things, at least for me. I mean, what was presented today wasn't a particular scenario of some person that had a compelling case to make a vesting argument. I mean, that Tom Sullivan from Gray Robinson at the hearing, who made the argument for the 1 year, had a specific case. He could talk about, where he was and why it would be a good idea and why it was fair. Today just seemed like a general opening up of the process to open it up to make it available to more people.
Board members, to me, this is beyond frustrating. I mean, we have support of the land developers. Every major builder in Central Florida has told us the same exact thing. The impact fees are fine because they want to sell their houses where their kids can go to our great schools. We've heard that over and over and over again. When you look at a 2-year delay, I believe we are in the peak of growth right now. At some point in time, we're going to come closer to building out. The financial impact is going to be devastating. I don't know how we're going to build classrooms for all the growth that we're seeing as we're driving around.
Exactly.
The land that's cleared. And so I've asked Mr. Rinaldi to put together for us what the financial impact could possibly be, first for the board, and then we're going to bring that to the county commission meeting on the 27th. But
Okay.
they want our schools, but they don't want to pay for them, and that's what it's coming down to right now.
Actually, the developer said that they are willing
That's right.
to pay for them.
That's right.
GOBA had no problem,
No problem.
with the impact fees in the process that we.
None of this makes any sense.
And it's not like we're at a line with
For
any
now.
other counties in the region.
And I asked Ms. Corbett specifically about this apartment association. They're not GOBA, they're not like GOBA, they're not representing every major builder. So we'll get more information.
Can we hear from some folks who actually represent apartment builders
Sure.
on this, in this? Because, I mean, we all know attorneys who represent apartment builders, and we're not hearing from them on this. So I don't know how we reach out to those folks, but I'd like to hear from some folks who actually are developing apartments in Seminole County. Integra is one group that has developed a lot in this community. I'm not hearing from them. So
Right. I mean, that's one of the issues. I mean, when we did hear from people while we were going through the process, we answered their questions, we explained our position. I think even when we were talking to Mr. Sullivan about his particular project, he didn't necessarily disagree with our analysis of what the legal standard is. It was just simply from a policy perspective, he was seeking relief on behalf of his client, sort of under the equitable estoppel, and it was a very specific case. And we can certainly reach out. Again, I think that you did have a very public process, and I think that today was an attempt to open up the vesting to other people. And, there are several attorneys who seem to be in and around this process that seem to be trying to open it up, and I don't think they're representative of all the development community, because I haven't heard a specific compelling case for why someone who either wants a vesting agreement and is being told they can't have one should be deserving of one. I'm just hearing criticism of the process, and we should make it 2 years. And then the other thing I want to point out, just for the other board members, and we touched upon this a little bit earlier, keep in mind we're supposed to update the fee study every 3 years. And the way the land development code language reads is that they allow them, each time they pass one, this vesting, the way they drafted this, and I objected to it at the time, but it didn't change, the way they've drafted it, each time they can vest against the next fee. So we're going to have this rolling vesting, and we'll never be able to catch up because everyone who was vested under this one, then we're going to be doing a new fee study, and then there's another 2-year delay. There's really no time in which we can really comfortably predict where we're going to be able to get the revenue.
Well, Dr. Griffin, you'll be able to report back to the board with the information you get, because we don't have a board meeting again based on
Because
the
of spring
time
break,
schedule
right.
of the.
We'll meet individually to discuss this.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We
Thank you.
appreciate
All of
you.
y'all. Thank you, Joe, too. That's a lot to digest.
Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Motion
Tina.
and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. Student discipline hearing dispositions, Dr. Griffin?
Yes, Madam Chair. My recommendation is that the School Board of Seminole County approve the student disciplinary recommendations from February 26, 2018.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Public comment this evening. I only have 2 forms for public comment. If anyone is here and would like to address the board, there are forms on the back table. You're welcome to fill those out and give those to the clerk. And I'll ask Dr. Calderon to go ahead and read our public input portion.
Good evening. The public input segment of the meeting is provided to allow the public to present specific matters to the school board for its consideration and referral to the superintendent and staff for inquiry and action, or address specific items on the agenda. The public input segment of the meeting is not open to presentation of campaign issues by political candidates or others, student disciplinary actions, pending employee disciplinary matters, or pending litigation. Our policy 9.63, civility and conduct of parents, visitors to school and school district facilities and district employees. It is not the intent of the school board to deprive any person of his or her right of freedom of expression. It is, however, the intent of the school board to promote mutual respect, civility, and orderly conduct on the part of the members of the public appearing before the school board. All speakers are limited to 3 minutes, must clarify what items they wish to address on the school board agenda, and if you could identify yourself and your address, we'd appreciate it. And our clerk will have a lighting system there that will warn you when your time is up. The school board's pleased that you've taken the time to the meeting this evening and that you're willing to make your views known or speak to issues to the school board. Thanks for coming out.
I will add, and this is something, I don't know, Ms. Beeman, you can tell us if the board needs to give direction, but I think we probably need to modify that based on input that's been given recently about specific matters relating to public safety and school safety items, that perhaps those should be handled privately because we talk about those in closed session.
That is correct, Madam Chairman, and it is on the list of items to be included in the update of policy that is coming before you in the next couple of months.
Okay, but in the meantime, I am just going to ask any members of the public that have concerns regarding school safety and security, if you have a specific comment about a specific concern at a school, I'm going to ask you to refer those directly to Captain Rick Francis. Wave your hand, Captain Francis. Or via email to Dr. Griffin or your principal. We don't want to broadcast to the community perceived weaknesses. Once those are out in the public, they can't be pulled back in, and frankly, we'd like to handle them quietly and fix anything that needs to be fixed before letting other people who might take advantage of that know. So we just appreciate that in the meantime. Okay, so tonight we have Kristen Ike and Mark Anthony. I'm going to ask you two if you would. Yeah, go ahead, come on up, and whichever one of you would like to speak first. I think you're speaking on the same item. All right. And if you would just state again your name and address for the record.
Yes. Good evening, Kristen Ike, 129 Ethan Hammock Court, Oviedo, Florida. I live in Southern Oaks, Phase 1 in Oviedo, and I'm here tonight to request that the school board either change the school attendance zone from Geneva Elementary to Lawton Elementary, or request that the superintendent issue an administrative waiver for my family to attend Lawton. And Mark Anthony is here as well. The past events that have brought me here tonight cannot be fully retold in the short time I have to speak, but summarize briefly, proper notice of the rezoning of our neighborhood from Lawton to Geneva was not properly posted, leading to 10 families receiving administrative waivers to attend Lawton Elementary. Southern Oaks Phase 1 consists of a single street and only 21 lots, with 10 of those lots already having been issued an administrative waiver. At this time, only my family and Mark's family have elementary school-age children that will not be able to attend Lawton. All other elementary school-age children in our neighborhood are attending Lawton. These administrative waivers are granted so that they allow the children in the family, including all siblings, to attend Lawton until they have completed the highest grade level at the school. So these administrative waivers are not fleeting. They give more protection and assurance than most families that are zoned for Lawton even have, because their school attendance zone can be changed at any time. But the administrative waivers will last quite a while and have fundamentally altered the school attendance of our neighborhood for the foreseeable future. Because of this, we believe that Geneva zoning is no longer appropriate or consistent with the following policies of Section 5.31 of the School Board Policy Manual, Revision of School Attendance Zones. Sub-policy 2, that the plan keeps subdivisions and small neighborhood units in the same attendance zone. Sub-policy 3, that the plan assigns students to the closest school to the extent practicable. Sub-policy 4, that the plan creates compact attendance zones with few or no island areas and minimizes the duration of travel time and distance. And sub-policy 8, that the plans should take into consideration contiguous communities as defined by natural barriers and roads. The noticing mistake that was made and the subsequent issuance of the administrative waivers irreparably fractured the neighborhood that is otherwise extremely close-knit. It deprives our children of the ability to attend school with their neighbors and friends, and deprives me as a parent from having the support network of other neighbors. This is not a Tuscaloosa-sized development, which covers a huge land area and where you might expect to find multiple school zones. This is akin to taking a single gated street in Tuscaloosa and dividing it where almost all the children attend one school and children from two families attend another. The reality of the situation today is that the administrative waivers have effectively rezoned Southern Oaks Phase 1 to Lawton, and I ask the board to acknowledge this reality by formally rezoning the neighborhood for the remaining few children on the street. Thank you.
My name is Mark Anthony. I live at 213 Ethan Hammock Court, and it's kind of hard to follow that up with a lot of specifics.
Did a great job.
She did a great job. So I'm going to kind of go off the cuff here and say that when my wife and I just moved in this neighborhood, we've been there for 2 months. And, when we looked to purchase the home, the school zoning was really unclear because the only bus stop we could find for that street was Lawton. And we called both schools to try to clarify the situation. There was a lot of confusion at the school level as well. So it wasn't until we got into this process and I got onto the street where our neighbors, we got to talking because there's only 21 homes in that neighborhood, that we realized there was an issue, that all the children on that street, pretty much up until a couple weeks ago, I thought I was the only one. Now I found out that Chris and I are in the same boat. And the thought of our children being the only ones that are going to get on the bus at the same bus stop with the majority of the children on that street, which is gated. I mean, it's kind of its own little neighborhood, even though it's Phase 1. To go to a separate school is concerning. I mean, it seems obvious to me as a parent. I would hope it would seem obvious to you as educators that that's kind of a weird scenario where you have 15 or so plus children getting on one bus going to Lawton, and it's just Kristen's child and mine going all the way out to Geneva. So we're really hoping that we can get some help with hopefully rectifying the situation. It just seems very unfortunate that we kind of found that out once we got in the neighborhood. I'm concerned about what it's going to do to my son. He's going to be going into 3rd grade. It's a new school. He's finally met some children on the street. And I was kind of hoping that he could carry those relationships into his new school. That doesn't appear to be the case, given this situation, and I think that's kind of a detriment potentially to him starting out in a new school. I just found out 2 weeks ago that my son scored a 126 on the nonverbal abilities test for exceptional students. So we have a signed consent for him to undergo the verbal portion of that here in August, which is going to coincide with the same time he's going to start school. And I just don't want all of this for him to feel singled out and deal with all that going into this school year. So really kind of hoping for some help.
Thank you. We
Yep.
appreciate your input. All right. Miss,
I have a question. I'm sorry. Madam Chair, can I ask a question on public comment or no?
Sure.
Dr. Cody, how many, yes, Madam Chair, and I don't know if Dr. Cody would like to come up or,
we're going to wait and let this parent.
oh, we have two on the same, okay.
Have
I thought
another-
that was one, they were done, okay. I thought they combined together and, I'm sorry.
Okay, we're just going to take this input, and
I'm
then we can
confused.
ask any other questions about public comment, if
Okay.
that's all right. I am going to butcher your name, so I am going to apologize ahead of time.
I'm sorry.
Umperovich Gray. Gracie? Umperovich? Umperovich Gray. Wow, all right. Ursula, thank you so much for being here. If you would, state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Ursula Suzanne Umperovich Gray. I live at 2534 L Portal Avenue in Sanford. My daughter attends Goldsboro Elementary, and which is a magnet school, as most of you know. They just had picture day, spring pictures. And I had the unique experience of finding out that one of the photographers was somebody that I grew up with, so that was kind of neat. And at this particular time, when she came back in for the fall pictures, she was walking around campus and taking candids. And you would expect that maybe she'd be stopped by a teacher or a resource officer. No, she was actually stopped by 4 separate officers. And I'm not complaining. I'm saying thank you. You guys are doing a really good job. And I don't think that that's like conveyed enough. And it's like, it's only when everything's falling apart, or, and especially given that wild circumstance from Volusia right in front of our school. So it was just it was nice to know that. And she wasn't bothered by it, in fact, he's doing his job. So I just want to say thank you very much. I know that things are so unpredictable, and it's hard to predict for the unpredictable, but you guys are doing great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Cody, it sounds like board members have some questions for you.
Board members, as Dr. Cody is working her way up, I drive past Southern Oaks every day, and Southern Oaks, if you remember during rezoning, is one name, but it's 2 separate faces separated by 434, and now there's a light going into phase 2. So it's really, you almost have 2 different names, like 2 different neighborhoods.
Me first? All right. Hi, Dr. Cody. How many students do we have right now that are grandfathered in or over to Lawton right now in that neighborhood?
I believe there were, Ms. Beeman, you'll have to help me on this one, I think 10 students that we were able to identify.
Correct. That sounds about right. And I want to be clear, they weren't grandfathered under the policy. There was a process where the developer provided the information, and we worked from that information. It was not a case of noticing regarding the rezoning. That was the issue. It was simply an issue of the website not being updated in a manner as quick as we would have liked.
So then, therefore, we chose to keep them over at Lawton.
No.
Due to the website not being.
The process was that we allowed the request to come in very specifically to address the issues so as not to overcrowd the school. And the parents were allowed to make that request for the identified individuals, the students, for a time certain. And once that process closed, it closed. So that neighborhood is zoned for Geneva.
Correct.
Those students were only those students were administratively assigned.
And I think it would be helpful maybe to start at the beginning, because this is a new development, and if you can walk us through what happened when the developer first sold homes and why that was done, as opposed to, I think we need to go back to the beginning, unfortunately, if you don't mind, because I think we need to walk everyone through how that happened. Is that
I can do that, or Ms. Beeman, or Mr. Rinaldi, however you prefer.
And Dr. Cody, I'm not familiar with the very initial when the developer, what they were doing. I know at the point that they contacted the school district.
The development was identified for an administrative rezone. Once that administrative rezone was approved by the board, one of the steps was to correct our maps to make sure that we had picked up that administrative rezone. In addition to that, the developer at the time had some brochures and documentation out that was based on the old information.
I'm going to stop you, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Because I think it's important, when we say an administrative rezone, that was done before there was vertical construction.
Yeah, in order to have an administrative rezone.
There were no houses on lots.
Well, I mean, no permits. So,
There weren't even any permits.
even a step beyond that, in order to have an administrative rezone, there are no building permits. So once the development commenced, then we were notified, or we observed that there was an error. We went to correct the mapping to make sure that when someone put their address into the website as to what school do they attend, that it was corrected. And then at that point, we worked with the developer, as Ms. Beeman said, in order to identify the specific contracts which they had signed, identify their children, so that we could do what was right, which was to identify them based on them signing their contract thinking they were going to Lawton. It's my understanding at this point that neither of these families were told that they were Lawton, that it was actually Geneva was correctly depicted on the map, correctly depicted on the website as well.
So if one of those families that owns a home currently that has one of the 10 children attending Lawton puts their house on the market and sells it to a new family, where will those new students attend school?
Geneva.
Okay.
I'd like to know if there is availability at Lawton at all.
No, Lawton Elementary is overcrowded and was actually closed in August of 2017 for the 17-18 school year.
Thank you. And when would, Dr. Cody, when would that be addressed again, in a year?
Well, there are no transfers into Lawton from any of our elementary schools for the 18-19 school year. And then in August, the families that were class-sized out of Lawton will have an opportunity to return pending space availability again. So that will be reviewed the following fall to see what our enrollment is for 19-20.
Thank you.
I also want to ask, is it a unique situation in this county to have children attending multiple different schools out of a neighborhood?
Certainly not in our regions, but more importantly, in our schools that have traditional zones, many families choose magnet programs or take advantage of one of the board's transfer options. So that's why we're a choice district. We have families that do elect other schools.
How many students approximately do we have right now on capacity transfers, that they're zoned for elementary school A, but because there's no capacity, we transport them to elementary school B?
Well, if there's no room, that would be a class size transfer. So approximately 220 students, and that's my last recollection. We may still have additional students.
So I'm just trying to figure out how this board could justify if there are 220 students in the county who are currently zoned for a school that they can't get into, how we could justify allowing students to attend a school that they're not zoned for and there's no capacity for. I mean, I understand the request. I'm trying to, in my mind, figure out how I can justify granting the request. And I don't know how I could answer those 220 students and their parents that we've told you there's no room for you in the school where you are actually zoned. Therefore, you have to go to another school where other children in your neighborhood don't attend.
Correct.
But we're going to make an exception in this case. I'm just trying to work my mind through that.
But Ms. Beeman, based on policy, we can't make exceptions, correct? Every single year, this board works collaboratively with our, what's the name of that new department?
Student assignment and program access.
Yes, to look at the enrollment numbers so we can give as many choices as possible. And we looked at those numbers, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we have to govern by policy that is set for that.
I'm not saying anything because you are correct.
Good girl. So we're bound by our policy at this point in time unless we choose.
Enter the rezoning process.
And by policy, rezoning is initiated by a process, which is outlined by your policy for particular reasons, as outlined in the policy.
I certainly appreciate and understand the request that's being made. I think we all do. I happen to live in the regions, and when my children were in elementary school, we had all of the students in our neighborhood going to 5 different elementary schools, and I hated it, which is why I voted against. I'm just going to get that on the record. That's why I voted against the regions, but I lost that vote, so that's okay. So I understand the frustration that exists, but I don't know, without engaging in a process that's governed by policy, how we would be able to grant that type of request. So at that point, I don't know if there are any other questions for staff. All right. All right. Any unfinished business or new business?
No, Madam Chair, I'm going to jump right to Superintendent's report. And board members, I've asked Ms. Beeman to give a very brief summary of the 105-page Senate Bill 7026 that Governor Rick Scott signed, just to discuss with you some of the different safety items. At the end of Ms. Beeman's discussion, I would like you to consider a closed session to discuss our security system plan meeting. I think there's enough here for us to talk about that we don't want to address publicly, but I thought a briefing is very appropriate at this time. I gave a similar briefing to Sheriff Lima 1:30 this afternoon. Ms. Beeman?
Well, good evening, board members. As you know, on March 9th, the governor signed Senate Bill 7026, which is known as the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act. And we have, with the assistance of the school board's lobbyist, Allison Lobby Schoonover, been following that legislative process, and ever since the tragedy in South Florida occurred. And this act is comprehensive. There's lots of issues to be addressed by the school board and other entities. And I wanted to just focus on a couple of the more school-centered provisions in the act We're going to have more discussion going forward, as Dr. Griffin mentioned. But first of all, there is the creation of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission. And that commission will investigate system failures in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting and prior mass violence incidents in this state and develop recommendations. More specifically, I think to us, the commission's work will include making specific recommendations for the appropriate ratio of school resource officers per school by school type. And that report, the initial report is to be given to the governor by the 1st of January of 2019. So the second thing that I wanted to bring up is that the Act establishes the Office of Safe Schools within FDOE, and that office will serve as a repository for best practices, training standards, all things related to school safety and security. And the office will also establish and update a security risk assessment tool that school districts can utilize for reviewing their own plans. The Act also amended Florida Statute Section 1006-12, which requires each school board and the superintendent to partner with law enforcement agencies to assign one or more safe school officers at each school facility within the district by implementing any combination of three things. 1, school resource programs. 2, school safety officers. Or 3, at the school district's discretion, to participate in the school guardian program if such a program is established by the sheriff. So then that takes us to the permission of the sheriff to establish a guardian program to aid in the prevention or abatement of active assailant incidents on school premises. So the Act will permit the sheriff to do that. A school guardian would have no authority to act in any law enforcement capacity except to the extent necessary to abate or prevent an active assailant incident on a school premises. Excluded from participation in the Guardian program are those that exclusively perform classroom duties as classroom teachers. Now, that limitation does not apply to classroom teachers that are JROTC or that are current service members or current or former law enforcement officers. So that is another thing that is a possibility to be discussed. The Act also requires a safety specialist, and it requires each school district to designate school safety specialist to serve as the district's primary point of public contact, and that person would also lead a team, a threat assessment team that has to be established at each school and would act under that individual's authority. The Act also provides for the establishment of a school safety awareness program, and that provides that the Department of Law Enforcement shall competitively procure a mobile suspicious activity reporting tool that allows students in the community to relay information anonymously regarding a number of things, including the threat of potential harmful or dangerous activities. The Act also amended 100607, which will allow us to require each student on an initial registration into the district to note prior mental health services that the student or referrals that the student has had. So, again, will require us to look at some of our initial documents and so forth to bring them up to compliance with the statute. And then finally, there was the mental health assistance allocation, which creates that allocation to assist school districts in establishing or expanding school-based mental health care. And I believe we are, and Mr. Kelly, I think about $1.6 million for that allocation. So that's a couple of the things that we will be discussing in the coming days regarding this particular act.
Thank you.
No, just a comment, aside from the mental health dollars, it seems like a number of the other items also require funding, and is there a funding mechanism in the budget?
There is, and I'll bring that to the closed session.
Thank you.
Do we have a date for that session, or the clerk will set it? Okay, thank you.
Super.
I think one of the things that strikes me looking at this list is how many of these things we already have in place, which is very confirming for me. I did have one question about and I know we'll discuss this in closed session, but if something that you could maybe look at is what exactly constitutes a referral to mental health services? Is that a family counseling session because, parents are divorced or a family member died, or is this a mental health referral because of some other, what triggers that? I'd like to get a clearer understanding for that session of what that means.
Okay.
Questions or comments about that? Thank you so much for going through that. I think our community has been asking a lot of questions. I think neighboring counties boards have made statements of things that they are not going to do. And I've been asked by media repeatedly, is your school board going to vote on this, that, or the other? And I said, well, we discuss our school safety and security plan in closed session. And at this point, no one has brought up the idea of changing what our current plan is, which is thankfully a fantastic partnership with the Seminole County Sheriff's Officer and a sworn law enforcement officer at every single one of our campuses. And that's been my answer, because we haven't discussed it.
Right.
And so I didn't think it was fair to put words in anyone's mouths, but.
Board members, just want to add, the second meeting I had at the Sheriff's Department was part of their audit. And as part of the audit, they were asking about our reaction. And my response was there was no overreaction, because this board has taken safety seriously as long as I've been superintendent, and probably longer. We have a process in place. We have a protocol that we follow. We have a great relationship with the Sheriff's Department. And I asked Sheriff Lima if he'd be part of some of this decision-making with us, because we work collaboratively, and I think there are some win-wins in the bill that Governor Rick Scott signed.
The other thing that we might want to note is the fact that there is a school safety security forum on March 29th.
6 to 7.
Last night, I attended one that happened at Lake Mary High School, and the media just covered the fact that there was one. So I'm just encouraging everyone to please attend the meeting on March 29th, because I think there's some valuable information that can be shared, and it's better for everyone to hear everything at the same time, so the message is consistent.
It's at 6
And
p.m.
questions are allowed online until Friday, is that correct?
We already have over 300 questions, I think almost
Wow.
400,
Wow.
and I think
Goodness.
we'll get a lot this week. And then we'll go through and pick the most popular ones to ask the panel.
And it's at Winter Springs High School at 6 p.m., correct?
That's correct,
Okay.
March 29th,
Second annual one, so.
second annual.
Okay. Do you have anything else for us before I move on to?
No, Madam Chair.
Board committee updates and board member comments. Mrs. Almond, you are up first this evening.
Thank you. I feel really lucky to be the first one, because you have a lot of events you can report on that we often all go to the same ones. So kudos, Dr. Griffin, and for all the board members and all the teachers and administrators and support staff that participated in the Walt Walk 5K, the first annual for wellness. That was awesome. 1,500 plus people.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Keep it up for us. It's good. Thank you. We all, I think, went to the military ball that was held, Joint Army and Air Force, for Lyman High School, Haggerty High School, and Seminole High School. I had never been before, so I was very impressed. It's great to see hundreds of young men in uniform, really polished.
And women.
They were not
They
in uniform.
didn't wear
Well,
they
one
wore
was in
gowns.
uniform. The ladies
The
were all in
keynote
gowns,
speaker.
which I was surprised, but they were in gowns. I'm only going to do a couple more things. Pink Day at Evans Elementary was really awesome. Miss Vaccaro, 4th grade, she tied it into the FSA writing prep, and the kids had phrases, and they walked down the runway. Thank you to Bridget Ellison with News 6 Good News. She reported she spent a good bit of time there, and gosh, good for her, because she's having a baby like any minute. It was quite evident. So wish her well with that. History awards we all went to. That was awesome too. Some really bright children or students in our district. Casper Chamber State of the City, and Dr. Griffin presented, the latest update in education, so appreciate you doing that very much. And I think I'll do my last one, United Negro College Fund. I sit on the Seminole Council. I thank all of you for coming to the breakfast to hear. Our keynote speaker was Angela Robinson. She's from Tyler Perry's The Have and the Have-Nots. She had a great story, but more importantly, our Mrs. Ingrid Nathan, who was the education champion, the first black student in 1964 to integrate into a white school in Seminole County. Powerful message, and I think a lot of people were surprised that someone would be alive, that participated in that, but it really was awesome. So that is my report. Thank you.
All right. First, I'm going to say I went to Lake Mary's Spanish Honor Society induction. There was over 150 students inducted. Miss Cardona and I went, and along with the Spanish teachers, and that Lake Mary auditorium was packed. You have to have 2 years of Spanish and say you're going to go into the Spanish 3 or an AP Spanish, and they spoke fluent Spanish. I just thought the program was amazing, so they did a great job with that. Business Advisory Board, thank you for meeting with us today, as well as last week we met at Lyman High School, and we discussed and had a tour of Sci-High, so that was great. And we really appreciate everything that the Business Advisory Board does for us, as well as all of our partners in education. Healing of the Arts Gallery at Florida Hospital in Altamont. We partner with Seminole Cultural Arts Council, so we have a lot of student artwork on exhibit there right now, and it will be there for 2 months. So if you go to the Altamont Springs Hospital into the Healing Arts location, it's the door to the left of it's actually in the main entrance, and you just go to the left and it's right there. You can see all the beautiful artwork that's on display, and it's featured from our students. We also had some great school visits before FSA started, Altamont Elementary and English Estates, so that's great. Like, a lot of us go to a lot of these things. Goldsboro, I know that Dr. Calderon and I were guest readers for Dr. Seuss's birthday, so thank you, Goldsboro, for allowing us to read. The Lake Mary Heathrow Art Festival, all of us were attending that and had a great time looking at all the different artwork that was displayed by our students. And the grand opening for the Eastmont Fields, Mayor Bates, along with many elected officials and our city manager, we had a chance to see the new fields and get to see all the new updates that they have done over there. And Joe Rinaldi and I went last week to the Energy Conservation Task Force meeting, and that was in the facilities department, something new that I've never even knew we even had that part, about just talking about how much energy are we conserving, and what rebates are we working with Florida Department, with the FPL and Duke Energy. What is our budget, all the different things that I had absolutely no idea. So that was something new for me, and I just thought I'd share that, and thank you. Kudos to you all for working so hard on that. There's a business advisory board member on that. There's student representatives on it, faculty members, everybody from all over. So I thought that was great. I didn't realize that we had done such a nice job saving money on so many different things in our schools, and then conserving over the summer, over spring break too. So I thought that was great. Thank you. Also, Families in Need program last weekend. I want to thank Dee Dee Schaffner for heading that, along with the leadership students from student government and all of our leadership teachers. They had a wonderful event over at Lyman High School where they've all collected canned food from the high schools, and they all collected everything over there. And then Amber DeMorse and Amy Elwood, and along with our drivers, met over there and helped everybody. And I went to that. That was really nice. So thank you to all of them. And my last one, because I know you all have a lot of other things. The coalition meeting for our Central Florida School Board Association, or Public School Board Coalition. We had Jeff Priedmore speak about the Central Florida STEM, and just basically making sure that we're getting coding in school, and everything that he was saying, I was nodding my head, yes, we do, yes, we do. And I said, well, we do all that. And he says, yes, well, Seminole County is one of the only ones that does that. So I thought that was nice, but it's true. We start them in kindergarten, we go all the way up. So kudos to all of our fabulous teachers and curriculum instruction, everybody. And then we had the legislative update by Wayne Birch, and that was amazing. And I believe everybody received the packet on all of that. And I know Sarita went over that too. So I will let you finish everything else. And then the JCC forum that we both went to, that was really nice as well. Go ahead.
Okay, believe it or not. Ditto to what they said, but I have more.
Yes.
A shout out, Polly, since you're here, to our PTAs. They're such great partners district-wide. We're looking forward to the Reflections upcoming event tomorrow night. But when you got to see our student invoker tonight, she won Miss Seminole High School, which is actually sponsored by their PTA, as a scholarship pageant. And you can tell the quality of students that are supported by the PTAs. So thank you for that. And a shout out to Young Women of Excellence, specifically at Lake Mary High School. I had the fortunate opportunity to work with them one day last week, and our future looks bright with these phenomenal future leaders that are going to be taking over for all of us. And both the Young Women of Excellence and Young Men of Excellence program, I think, have exceeded our expectations. Dr. Griffin, when you and I and a few other people with Mr. Blackshear sat around in a little office and tried to dream it, to know how quickly the program has grown. Thank you, Dr. Cody, for your support as well, and Mr. Guy. We're really helping lives. Do you agree? Is it a great program? Good. And while we're talking about history lessons, I had two great opportunities. There's so much history and culture, especially in the city of Sanford. We had the Hamilton rededication a few weeks ago, and to see how many people in the still live in the community that used to go to either Hamilton or knew Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton, and they still came back to honor it. And one of our speakers that day was actually the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton. She came all the way from Atlanta just so she could be there for the grand reopening. So because of the connections and synergies that we created that day, she has decided to open up an endowed scholarship in our foundation in her parents' name for a student who went to Hamilton Elementary School and is going to go to UCF, to the College of Education. So she wants to bring it full circle, and hopefully we'll have those Hamilton children be our future teachers in the district. Saturday, I had the opportunity to go to the Hopper Academy reopening. You wouldn't recognize the building. They have done such great work. Art Woodruff headed that committee, and I kind of felt emotional when I got to stand in Mr. Crooms' office upstairs. It was his original office for Principal Crooms, and I think there's such a legacy in that building that's one of the many reasons we love Seminole County, that we honor our past and focus on the future, and that's just one of the ways that we do it. But what was very touching is talking to some of the residents there that had attended that school. So you know that they had to be 100 years old or close, and they came back for that rededication, so that was phenomenal. And I want to thank the Sanford Chamber, who monthly honors our Teacher of the Month and Student of the Month, and this month it was Midway Elementary. So it's phenomenal to award and reward our hardworking teachers. And as far as our committee work, we had an Insurance and Wellness Committee meeting last night. We rehashed the WALT 5K. We already have the date set for next year. It will be at Lake Mary High School and Greenwood Lakes Middle School. We're going to move it around the county each year. And we're going to be having a joint work session in the next month with the Insurance and Wellness where we'll look at our agreements with Cigna and all of our other insurance forms. So I look forward to updating you on that. And right before this meeting, we had the opportunity to meet with the Business Advisory Board, and I see Mr. Sean Essler, our Vice Chair, in the audience tonight. But I'm really excited about the direction that our partnership is going to be taking with the Business Advisory Board, and please send back our thanks of the input and the support and that they give the school district is immeasurable. So I really appreciate them as well.
I was able to spend some time with our students last week and a couple of weeks ago, which I always love doing. I know every one of us enjoys the time to be in the classroom, but I was out at Haggerty High School, and I was told there are some Haggerty students here tonight. I was able to spend some time talking to their leadership class, and we had a great time. It was over lunch. I kind of threw the table open and said, ask what you want to ask. And so we had some really good conversation. These kids are bright, and they have a lot of great input. And so we love anytime we get a chance to hear from them. So thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for being such valuable resources to us as school board members. Also out in that area, in that part of town, as a trustee for Seminole State College, I was honored to be able to attend the renaming of the Oviedo campus of Seminole State to the Robert and Jane Lee campus. The Lee family has been a tremendous supporter of not only Seminole State, but Mr. Lee, Robert Lee, before he died, set up an endowment that is now valued at $4 million to provide scholarships for students who have grown up in the Oviedo area to allow them to attend Seminole State College. And that is going to change generations of Oviedoans. And his dad did not want any recognition. Rick Lee, who is chairing the search committee for replacing Dr. Ann McGee as the president of the college, had a really neat event where the folks in that community came out and honored his dad and told some really great stories. And that family has a commitment to service and giving. Philanthropy, I think, defines that family's life. And so Rick's hope is that through recognizing his father in that way, by naming the campus after them, that will spur on other good works. So just thank them. Also talking about Seminole State College, you mentioned the Dream Gala. This year's Dream Gala netted the most amount of money ever, over $430,000. Incredible, and I want to thank all of you for being there and participating in that. Those of you that were there from the district, that partnership with Seminole State is so important to our students, and the more that we can help and support one another, the better. But know that you were there the night that was the end-all, be-all, best fundraising ever for that event. I also want to thank Dr. Griffin and Dr. Walsh and her team for continuing to stay engaged in the discussion on homelessness in Seminole County. There's been a lot of ramped up discussion lately about Seminole County perhaps pulling out of the current continuum of care, which includes Orange and Osceola, and creating our own. That's creating a lot of discussion. There are a lot of ramifications of that, which we are not still really clear on. But we're going to continue to pursue those. And I just want to thank you for staying engaged, because while the county as a whole is worried about all sorts of homelessness, we are specifically worried about students who are homeless or at risk of being homeless, and we want to make sure that those voices are heard during those conversations. So I appreciate you. Okay, so that's what's happened in the past. Next week, or later on this week, Dr. Griffin and I will be going out to Geneva to talk with the folks out there. They're having some concerns with the car line and the way the cars are queuing up in downtown in front of the elementary school, so we're going to see if we can't talk about some of that. Also, we have coming up the Teacher of the Year event is March 15th. So grateful that the Foundation for Seminole County Public Schools has taken this year's event on 100%. They are leading the charge, and we are so grateful that they're doing that. They also have a golf tournament planned March 26th, which is to have two major events like that back-to-back as their sole responsibility, I think is yes, crazy would be a good word, but they wanted to do it. So we're grateful so much for their support. Also, I want to thank Jason Wysong. During spring break, he is going to go with me, I'm sorry, you drew the short straw, to the Seminole Chamber Longwood Council that meets. We're going to talk about all of the exciting things that we have going on with vocational and technical education in the county, things going on with aviation and manufacturing and all of those things. I think because we don't have a VOTEC school in Seminole County as its own site, there's some perception that we don't have vocational in Seminole County, and that we all know that couldn't be further from the truth. So Jason and I are going to go and do a little tag team with the folks in Longwood, and I'm looking forward to that. Dr. Griffin and I will be attending Mayors and Managers also Tuesday. We've got another round of Mayors and Managers. And we have a policy work session that for Neola with these new policies, and it's a lot. So I'm going to ask you to bring whatever caffeinated beverage you like best.
Pajamas. Yeah, PJs.
It's going to be a marathon, and so I appreciate your willingness to spend all day going through this, but it's imperative that we do it, and I appreciate the work for that. And thank you, Sarita, and your team for doing this.
She wants to wear pajamas. Can we?
Other than that, I just want to wish everyone a very happy Passover and a happy Easter coming up. Spring break is going to be great. I know it doesn't coincide with either of those two holidays that I know so many of our families celebrate, but we want to wish everyone who celebrates those a very holy and blessed time. So anything else anyone has to share? Okay.
I can't believe Dr. Calderon is letting me do this. She doesn't even know it. But one of our teachers, Luther Davis from Lake Mary High School, is going to be swimming 180 miles. He is leaving the St. Johns River and swimming from Sanford to Jacksonville. The entire 183-mile journey, hike, kayak, and swim, traces the path of a raindrop as it takes after falling onto his lawn in Longwood as it navigates his way to the Atlantic Ocean. Is that not the coolest thing you've ever heard?
It doesn't surprise me.
No, but I wish him safe passage and that he stays in good health, good physical health, and good mental stamina on that
There
journey.
to send him off and you can track him
Me too.
online as he swims and meet him along the way.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome.
Very,
I
very
have
cool.
one more thing.
Very cool for a lesson.
That's awesome.
That's it. Thank you.
All right.
One real quick thing. Everybody have a safe holiday, spring break. Teachers, thank you for everything you do. Administrators as well. I just wanted to share something that I received from Wilson Elementary School. A group of students were working together, and they put a March into Kindness act together and different things that they're going to do to help their family members and things. They worked together doing this, and I just thought it was beautiful, but they have an Environmental Monday with a bunch of different activities, Service Tuesday, extra recess on Celebration Wednesday, and having fun Fridays and family time. Family time is crucial. So everybody enjoy your families.
With that, we will adjourn at 7:10-ish.